Hi, I'm Hannah Pilates and this is my husband Garth, and we're really excited today to share our hypnobirth story. And this is our little baby Arlo, who is 10 days old today. I'm a midwife and I work at the Gold Coast Hospital.
Yeah, I'm a doctor and I also work at the Gold Coast Hospital.
Just to give you a bit of a background so you understand more about my experience with Arlo, my first birth with my daughter Evaliah, who's almost 3 years old now, and as a midwife I kind of was expecting to go overdue with her. So we got to 37 weeks and we were thinking, oh, we still have plenty of time.
Babies.
Plenty of time until the birth. So I was with the birth centre. I had my own midwife who I actually worked with, so we had a great relationship, and that was one of the reasons I chose her to be my midwife. So my waters broke unexpectedly 4 o'clock in the morning, which was a bit of a shock to us, wasn't it? And I said to Garth, don't get too excited, I need to go back to sleep. We have to make sure that my contractions start, and if we start turning on the lights and everything, it's all going to stop. So that's pretty much what happened. The waters just kept coming and I tried to go back to sleep and that just wasn't happening. So we spoke to my midwife and we made the plan for expectant management, so just to wait until my contractions occurred naturally. And that was the first day, nothing really happened. So we tried everything, we kind of walked through the park, we were walking gutters because my daughter was posterior, so we were trying to turn her as well. Nothing really happened, so we thought maybe that night things would kick off, and they didn't, so we were in the minority again. It basically took 3 days until my contractions started. They were coming irregularly on day 2 and 3, but just every like 20 to 30 minutes. So it was enough that we weren't getting any sleep, so we were absolutely exhausted, but they weren't effective contractions. And I think what actually ended up getting me into labour was we went to acupuncture. I was recommended to go and try that, so we did try acupuncture. And then my midwife said, just go and do something that, you know, you'll not want to be in labour for, and Murphy's Law, you'll just go into labour. So I went and got my nails done, and about half an hour later started contracting every 5 minutes. So stopped that pretty quickly and went home. And I laboured for a while in the shower at my parents' house for a couple of hours. And then things became really intense. I had like a lot of back pain and I wasn't really coping at home. I kept feeling like I needed to push, so I was thinking maybe I might have been further along than what I was. So when Garth called the midwife, she made the decision, we all made the decision to go into the birth centre. I had kind of lost control a little bit of my emotions. I wasn't as in control as I would have hoped, which was making me feel like I had failed already. And poor Garth. When
we arrived, Hannah said, I've had enough, I want to go home now.
I just want to go home. Can you pack my bags? I want to go home. And he's like, no, we're having a baby. And I was like, no, I just really, really want to go home, didn't I? Yeah. I don't know, I couldn't get into any sort of rhythm, and I kind of thought as a midwife, oh, I'll be fine, I don't need techniques, I'll just figure it out when I'm in there, it'll all just happen. And I think that's definitely where I went wrong, because poor Garth was offering support and wanting to help me but didn't really know the best way how. And then I wasn't really receptive to anything anyway. But I did try the bath, so we hopped in the water. My midwife had that prepared for me. And I tried it for a couple of contractions but didn't really give it a good go, and then I was just really overwhelmed that the back pain wasn't going away. I wasn't really complaining about the contractions, it was more just the back pain to do with her being posterior. So my midwife thought, let's do a vaginal examination, then you'll know where you are and you'll feel better about continuing, which would have been all well and good if I wasn't 2 centimetres, which totally just I was just so disheartened, and my midwife brain kind of switched on and I was like, 2 centimetres, I know how, I've got at least like 8 hours to go, I can't do this. And I went into complete shutdown mode. So my midwife did say, the language she used was positive, like she didn't say, you're only 2 centimetres. She said, before I tell you this, don't get disheartened though, and you're fully effaced, so my cervix had thinned out and all the early labour stuff had kind of happened, but you are 2 centimetres. And to me, like I thought I was acting transitional. I thought I'm about to have a baby, just push through a couple more hours and it will be done. So at that point, they offered me the sterile water injections, they offered gas. I tried gas for like 30 seconds and said I hated it, and I just wanted an epidural, so they organised that pretty quickly. I had a really high temperature, so they started Panadol and fluids, and I had triple antibiotics as well because my waters had broken by that point about 75 hours. So I started all the antibiotics. I had 6 lines going, so I had cannula in both hands, my epidural. It was starting to look very medicalised, completely not what I wanted, and I was getting really overwhelmed by that. And at the same time, we had the fetal scalp clip on the baby's head, so I could hear the heartbeat right next to me, and her heart rate was constantly high, like way too high, and I kept saying that. The heart rate's really high, the heart rate, and they kept saying, just relax, and I just couldn't. So Garth, you had a little bit of a sleep, because it had been 3 days, we hadn't had any sleep, and he got woken up to pretty much 20 people running into the room saying, we've got to get this baby out now, we're going to have to do an emergency cesarean. And although I'd been begging for a cesarean 2 hours before, I didn't really want one. So as soon as they said that, I was like, no, this isn't what I wanted. And obviously if the baby was in distress, I was so happy to do whatever I needed. But luckily, at the same time, I was feeling heaps of pressure, like I needed to push. So my midwife said, let's just check her quickly, and I was fully dilated. So Garth got woken up to, all right, we're getting this baby out right now. And he was like, you were pale and didn't know what was going on.
You were pale.
I was pale too, I was shaking, and I think it was quite confronting for you to see.
Just lay down for a little nap and I wake up.
And it was, yeah, like a big emergency. So pretty much after that decision was made, they were doing the vacuum, and it was suggested that I have an episiotomy, and that was in my birth plan, that was 100% not what I wanted, and I would rather tear than have an episiotomy unless it was an emergency, and this wasn't an emergency that an episiotomy would have helped. It was only just to prevent tearing. So I said no. It was going to happen anyway. So I was lucky that I had a midwife that I trusted, that knew my birth plan, that stepped in and advocated for me and took the scissors away and said no, this isn't what she wanted. But anyway, they did the vacuum and she was born, I think it was two pushes or something. She was born, so like 5 minutes later, she was out, put on my chest, and then she was taken off to special care soon after. So I had the syntocinon for second stage, and I didn't really get a lot of skin-to-skin time with her before she was taken away, and you had gone as well. And then we had 5 days in hospital for antibiotics, so both her and I needed antibiotics because the waters had broken for quite a while. And we had a big debrief with like the doctors about the episiotomy, because I found that one of the most confronting and traumatic parts of the birth, because I felt I'd already lost control completely of my own body, and then I had said no, I don't want something, and it was going to happen to me anyway, and in the end I didn't tear at all. So if I had have had an episiotomy, it wasn't going to get her out any quicker, but it would have given me a lifelong injury that I would have had to deal with. So I found that really confronting, and that was definitely something that I wanted to avoid with the second birth. When I was a midwife doing my training, I had done a hypnobirthing course, which I really enjoyed, and I've seen women have beautiful hypnobirths. So when I became pregnant with Arlo, I was really overwhelmed in the very early parts of my pregnancy with the thought of having to give birth again. As excited as I was to be pregnant, I was already having nightmares about the birth. And I didn't want that experience. I wanted it to be a positive time, and I really hoped to have like a more healing birth. So we looked into our options, and I found the Hypnobirthing Australia program through another friend of mine who had done it and absolutely loved it. And she found it was just so effective for her. So we chose to do belly to birth program with Shari, mainly because we believed in the hypnobirthing program, but we really wanted a program that facilitated a positive birth experience no matter what turn the birth took. So whether we did end up with intervention again, whether I did end up requesting an epidural, whether we did end up with an emergency cesarean, I didn't want it to be a traumatic experience. I wanted it to be something that I looked upon positively, and I wanted to feel empowered no matter what turn the birthing took. And I think that was definitely Shari's approach throughout the whole course, was not you need to have this ideal birth, but that I want you to feel good about the birthing experience that you have.
Well, it was a tricky weekend actually, because it was a weekend I was working, and then Hannah kind of thought you broke your waters, but then
we weren't quite sure,
really sure
what was going on. I'd been getting like on and off symptoms, like I was gonna go into labour, pretty much like contracting, getting Braxton Hicks that were really regular. Then they'd wake me up in the middle of the night and I'd get contractions, and we were going back and forth, do you think this is the day? Do you think this is the day? And with Evaliah, it really threw us off guard, because we were like, oh, I'm only 37 weeks, what's going on? But this time I'm like, okay, I'm past 37 weeks now, what's going on? Am I gonna have this baby, or am I gonna go overdue this time? And then I was like, we just didn't know what to expect. Your work was like, oh, you know. Yeah,
they were really flexible.
They were good, yeah. So you ended up taking the day off work because we thought my waters might have broken, and I was getting Braxton Hicks, now they were probably early labour pains. I got really tired, do you remember?
Nap.
And Garth's like, go and have a nap, and I never do that in the middle of the day. Then we woke up and planned to take the dog for a walk around the park. And
we went and took the dog for a walk around the park. Got home, and then you're starting every 20 minutes.
Yeah.
A bit more regular, a bit stronger.
And they were to the point where I was like, they weren't just Braxton Hicks. I was sitting on the couch and I was like, no, I need to get up. Like, I need to move. I was then started going over the bags again, like making sure Evaliah had a bag packed to go to my mum's house and that everything I needed was done. I started doing the washing. I should do the washing needs to be done. I was like really nesting in my last couple of hours. Like, we put Evaliah to bed, and Garth and I said, oh, we should have an early night, try and get some rest in case I go into labour early in the morning. And we never quite got to sleep. So I pretty much, as soon as, it was like 7:30 at night, as soon as my head hit the pillow, I just got a really quite intense surge and had to get up, go flip over, hands and knees, and you were trying to rest as well, but obviously couldn't because I was next to you, like trying to breathe through. And so then we just decided,
there's no resting from there.
No, we just decided we need to start kind of treating it like I'm in labour now, because we couldn't really ignore it for any longer.
Yeah, we put music on, then we got Hannah's parents to come pick up Evaliah. So they came by late and woke them up, and they came around and picked her up, which was really good.
They came about 10:30. And I think that was important for me to feel like Evaliah was cared for. There was someone allocated to her, so that wasn't in the back of my mind anymore, because although that she was asleep, I kept thinking, what if this progresses and I've got my daughter? And so it's when she was picked up, that was a good feeling, just to have just the two of us. Yeah. We kept the lights really low. We had the positive affirmations playing in the background, which is really good.
Candles on.
Just the same voice kind of going over helped me get through all the contractions. You had the candles on.
And by about midnight, things were getting a bit more intense. So we called up the midwife, and then the midwife came around. That's
the beauty about the birth centre, so you can have your midwife. She comes and does home visits, so I didn't have to go into hospital this time, and then for fear that they did an assessment and I wasn't as far dilated, get sent back home. It was like I was already here and I was feeling like things were intensifying, and if it wasn't, that was fine. We were happy to stay a bit longer.
It was hard to predict how far along you were, because on the first birth you acted so transitional very early. Then you were so much more calm during this birth. We weren't sure, you just nowhere near as far along, but it actually turns out.
But I recognised the same feelings with Evaliah, like I was getting the same, my surges would start with a intense tightening in the front, and then it would get to a certain point that it would get easier, and then it would go straight to my back. So I'd just know, all right, just get through that first initial part of the surge, and then it's going to go to your back, and then it's going to go away. And I just, every time I got it, I was like, yeah, this is going to, one less that I have to get through. Then my midwife got there, and she didn't want to assess me straight away, because I think she was the same midwife from my previous birth, and she was thinking, she didn't want to assess me and then tell me what I was and then me get disheartened. And it ended up just me 2 hours later and I got a really like intense surge, and I thought, oh, if I have that in the car, that might be
a bit scared about
I was a bit scared about the car trip, so I thought, oh, I just want to be checked just in case. And she was pretty reluctant. She was like, just give 15 minutes. And I was like, nope, I want to be checked. And once I get my mind on something, that's just kind of has to happen the way I want it to. And she wasn't going to tell me what I was, so she checked me for about 10 seconds and said, yep, we need to get to the hospital. And I was like, I need to know. And Garth's like, nope, you don't want to know. You didn't know either. And I was like, no, we had discussed with Shari not finding out what I was, and I had a feeling when I was in this situation that I just wouldn't be able to handle not knowing, and it's the way it was. I wanted to know, and it was really positive because I was 6 centimetres fully effaced and the baby was down really low, and they thought I would be disheartened by that. I think my midwife thought I would be a bit disheartened by that, and I wasn't. I was so happy. I started crying of happiness. I was so excited, like I was just like, yes, I'm 6 centimetres. And I said, what did I say? I'm over halfway. I'm over halfway. Like, I was so excited. And in my mind, I thought, oh, like just another 4 hours, 4 or 5 hours, and I'll have a baby. So we got into the car.
You got there pretty quick.
Yeah. Every time we got to a red light, Garth would take off really fast and kind of jolt me, and that would give...
Not while the red light, no, after the red light. Once it went green.
And it would give me another like surge, and then I would not very happy about that, but that was all right. So we got to the hospital.
Try drive slow when you've got a lady contracting your car. It's not happening.
No. So we got to the hospital, into the birth centre, and my midwife had already set up the birth space for us. So the lights were really dim. I had the same rainforest room that we had with Evaliah. I thought that being in that room would remind me of Evaliah's birth, but it just didn't. Her birth didn't even come into my mind at all. Like I didn't think about her birth at all. I didn't worry about it going the same way. I was just coping so much better, so it just wasn't affecting me the same way. And then I really appreciated being in the same room, and I thought this is actually perfect. If I have a beautiful experience in this room, that's, I think, going to even help even more with healing from my previous birth.
You got there and you got in the spa?
Yeah,
bath.
we got in the bath.
And you're in there for 5 hours? So
5.5 hours.
like that. When we got there, then we called the photographer, and she arrived.
Yeah, and she was great. Like, she was perfect. I hardly even recognised that she was even in my space. I didn't feel like, you know, that one of our concerns about a photographer, videographer in my birth space, we were thinking I'd feel observed and that might affect me. But I was just so in my own bubble, in my own zone, that anyone could have been there and I would not have noticed. Like Garth was my main focus. I'd get through my surge. I think I was listening to the positive affirmations until I got into the water, and then I just didn't want to listen to that anymore. I didn't find that was helping me. I wanted music but no words, just so I could do what I needed to do. I wasn't the typical quiet hypnobirther, I don't think. Like I was
pretty quiet.
I probably feel like I was a lot louder than what I actually was. I was definitely a lot quieter than I was last time. But I was just focusing on my breath. Like the breath was just so important this time. And so I had the gas pretty soon after I got into the pool. And just focusing, I knew I had to do long, strong breaths anyway for the gas to be effective. So I was just focusing, just breathe in, lift myself up, then drop down. And I'd kind of come up and then just float back into the water and just let the water take my weight. And then because I was in the water, I could just move so easily. So I would always go to the left side first, and then that's when I'd get the tightening in the front. And then it would go to my back, I'd roll to the right, and then I'd hold on to my back, and then it would be over, and then I would pop up, and then I'd talk to Garth again. We had like laughing moments, and then we had times where I would be crying, but happiness. Like I started crying because I missed Evaliah like midway through my contractions, and then I had like a thought of her not being my only child anymore, and I started crying about that. I wasn't asking for an epidural or anything this time. Like didn't really ask. Once I had the gas, I didn't ask for any pain relief, and I wasn't even focusing on pain relief. Like it's not that I didn't have painless contractions, but I felt like I could handle it. This is where, like with my first birth as a midwife, I started to analyse the situation. So I knew that I was assessed at 2:30 in the morning. I was 6 centimetres, so I was expecting that by 6:30 I should have been fully dilated. And I was looking at the clock and just thinking, 6:30, I didn't feel like I needed that, feel the desire to push, which I didn't feel with my first birth because I had an epidural. So I felt pressure, but I never felt like that
You're
overwhelming.
Questioning the whole time. You're like, am I supposed to, like, when do I know I'm going to push?
Yeah, I think that was in the back of my mind this time because I never got to experience that overwhelming desire to kind of breathe the baby down and get through second stage. So I was like, am I going through it and I'm not noticing it? Because I hear it's so overwhelming you can't not notice it. But I knew I was still getting the back pain, so I thought, oh, it's probably not at that point. What's going on? And my midwife didn't want to assess me because once she assesses me again, then it could get a bit medicalised and go off track. So she didn't want to, so I assessed myself in the bath. And I felt cervix, so I still had cervix at the front. And I said that to my midwife. I said, didn't I? I can still feel cervix. And she's like, don't overthink it. And I was like, I'm checking. And she said, that's fine, you check if you want to check. So when I got a contraction, the head came down, I just felt my membranes were bulging, so I could feel that they needed to go. And I could still feel cervix there. And which was funny, like, that I was just taking it into my own.
Not many people do that.
No. And I'd been in the pool for 5.5 hours by this point, and then my midwife asked me, my best friend's also a midwife, and she said that she'd like to come in, and it was just the perfect time. Like, I was just starting to feel that, I'm not sure if I can do this. Like, this is taking longer than I expected. I got to this point, I thought this would be over. Am I getting stuck at this point now? And then they said, do you want Kirsten to come in? And I was just like, oh yes, that's exactly what I need. Like, a fresh face. And I know she's just the most positive person. As soon as I see her, she makes me feel so good about myself. I knew if she came in and I saw her face, I could just keep going for that little bit longer. And she came in. Garth and B, my midwife, had already tried several times to convince me to get out of the pool, and I would not have it. Like, come on, let's just try a different position. No. I had just got myself into a rhythm, and I knew, go to this side, go to that side, get through that contraction, go to this side, go to that side, get through. But I mean, I wasn't really listening to you, was I?
Kirsten came and saved the day.
And then as soon as she walked into the door, she was like, Hannah, you're doing amazing, get out of the pool. Yeah. And I was like, okay. So I did, and I wanted them to check me again, like, because I felt the cervix, and I just thought, oh, I think you should check. So they did check, and my waters then broke on their own while she was checking. So my waters had broken. Obviously their head was better applied onto my cervix, and as soon as I stood up, just that gravity, because I'd been floating horizontally in the pool, which was great because it was taking the pressure off my back, but it wasn't actually helping in progress my labour. Which I knew, like, I just needed that extra push to get out. And I had this, like, really conscious moment at that time. Like, I was, like, standing up, I had a bit of a break from contractions, and I was like, oh, where do I want to have this baby? And everyone just looked at me like I had just re-entered the room, like I wasn't even in the labour anymore. And I was like, do I want to have the baby in the water? Do I want to do this? Do I want to do that? And everyone was like, oh, okay.
Try to make it back into the water.
And then I got another tightening, and I was like, could feel a bit of a burning sensation, and I was like, oh, I still didn't have that strong desire to push, but I felt burning, so I was like, oh, hang on, I think the baby could be like, I think I could push this baby out. And then literally I was holding onto the side of the bath, and I was like, I want to get back in, I think it'll be nice to have the baby in the water, and that was it pretty much.
Yeah, it didn't make it.
I just got this overwhelming urge just to bear down, and I just, his head was out within like 30 seconds, and then they just said, oh, next contraction, the baby will be born, and it was. So he came out, Garth was standing behind me, so Garth caught the baby.
You were standing over the
I was kind of leaning over the bath and I had one leg. My body just obviously told me that I needed to do this. I had one leg completely up the side on the bath.
No,
like,
that was up in the air.
Up in the air.
I was holding the leg.
I remember just thinking, I need to make space. I don't know why. My leg just went whoop. And so Garth was trying to hold one leg whilst also trying to like catch the baby as the baby was coming out quite quickly. And
slow the head coming down.
Yeah, slow it down a little bit because once I got that urge, it was just like, okay, this baby is coming out now. And he was born pretty much like a minute later. Like it just all happened so quickly. And he was wrapped around a few times with his cord, so it was a bit short to like reach him back up to me. So Garth unraveled him with the midwife and put him on my chest. And I just couldn't believe I had done it. Like I was just so happy. I was just, oh, I did it. I birthed the baby, and it was just the exact experience that I wanted. I couldn't believe it. And it sounds silly, but you know, I'm so afraid of needles. One of the first things I said was, I didn't have any needles, like nothing. I didn't have any cannulas, I didn't have any injections. And then when it came time for the placenta, like they were like, and my midwife was like, do you want the injection? And I was like, no, like everything's been so natural, let's just keep it that way. So I had skin to skin, and he wasn't taken away from me at all. So I had an hour of skin to skin, and we didn't even cut and clamp the cord for like an hour and 10 minutes afterwards or something. And I breastfed pretty much for the whole hour. And then I had birth the placenta on the birth stool like an hour and 10 minutes later, didn't I? And then you had some skin to skin time, which was really nice. But it was just such a different experience. Like the baby was never taken away from me. There was no rush, there was no emergency. My blood loss was so minimal. Like I was up straight away pretty much after that in the shower, and we were home in bed. I had the placenta at 9:10 and I was home in bed by 12. So, and we were just, don't you remember, we were just sitting in the bed, we were like, we just had a baby. Like we've just got this baby now, and we're in our bed and we're at home and so comfortable. And then Evaliah came over in the afternoon and met him, and that just melted my heart to a million pieces seeing them together. And it's just been a completely different experience. Like he's just so calm, and we took to breastfeeding pretty much straight away this time. There's
moments where we looked at each other, I was so proud of like how well she was going, like just to handle it with, you know.
I could really see that in your eyes too, like when you looked at me, and
made to be a mum.
I just knew that that's how he felt. He didn't even have to open his mouth. The way he looked at me, I looked at him and I was like, he's so proud of me right now, and he knows I'm doing this. Garth, the whole time, like you never went to sleep, you never kind of switched off, you were always there and you were always present. And he kept talking to me in the middle, like in between contractions, you can do this, you know, you're doing so well. And I think because we'd practiced it before, it wasn't like, I could really feel you meant it. And because I really felt like he meant it, I really believed it. And every time he said it to me, it just helped me get through that one. You'd say, you know, that was an intense one. You did really well to get through that. And it was kind of like I'd get some really intense ones, and the next ones would be not as bad, and you'd kind of remind me of that. And you kind of knew exactly what I wanted, except at one point.
Keeping you hydrated.
Except at one point. Do you remember? So I think he'd watched it in Shari's birth, like the water being tipped on the back. I think it was one of the Hypnobirths.
Yeah, it was one of the techniques to pull the water over her back while she's in the bath.
And I was loving the ice water. You'd give me ice water in between.
But I didn't realise that the midwife had brought over the iced water.
He poured it all over me.
I thought it was the nice warm pool bath water, so I poured the ice water on her back by accident.
It was, but I laughed. Like
you did not laugh.
Oh,
you did not like that.
It was bad. But inside, I was thinking, I cannot believe he did that. Like,
yeah, that's a mistake.
I've already recommended hypnobirthing to.
You've heard about 5 people already.
Yeah, I have, and like all my friends and family, and like even friends that had quite a medicalised birth and aren't necessarily planning a natural birth this time. I've said it doesn't matter. You don't have to do hypnobirthing and think, no, I can't have pain relief, or I can't ask for any intervention. It's not about that. It's just about if you choose to have an elective cesarean this time, it's viewing it as a positive experience and being able to go through it calmly, and like even when the spinal, the epidural is getting put in, like being calm and positive and still feeling empowered that you've carried your baby and that you're birthing the way you want to and making it your own experience. I think it's about having all the knowledge and then making informed choices and then feeling empowered because you're more in control of your emotions and yourself and your experience. So I hope you really enjoyed hearing Arlo's birth story. I would 100% recommend doing the Hypnobirthing Australia program with Shari. It's just completely transformed our whole birthing experience and we couldn't be more grateful. And if you guys have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I would love to chat with you guys and answer any questions that you guys have. And really going to try and bring more videos for you, so stay tuned and thanks for watching. I'm going to say something.